If you ride for long enough, eventually you're going to come across a horse that's going to buck, rear, or bolt with you. In this video, what I want to do is just walk through some things that can help you out in those situations. So while these things may help you, it's important to keep in mind that there's always a risk when horseback riding. These tips aren't necessarily going to keep you from falling off, but hopefully they give you the tools you need in those situations to get your horse back under control. Let's first talk about bucking. So unfortunately, well, not unfortunately, I can't make Tucker buck on command to kind of walk you through it that way. So I'm just gonna talk about what you can do and kind of give some examples walking. When it comes to bucking, there's a few things to remember. Number one, your horse's head has to go down in order for them to kick up their back feet and buck. One thing you want to do is, if you find your horse starting to buck, you need to have your rein short and pull their head up and try as hard as you can to keep their head up and keep them from bucking. Another thing you're going to want to do is you're going to want to sit back. So you're holding their head up and you want to sit back, and the reason for this is sitting back will keep your balance over the center of your horse, because the last thing you want to do if your horse is bucking is pitching forward, because if you're pitched forward and your horse is bucking and their head is down, you're probably going to fall off. So sit back, pull their head up. Another thing is, remember your legs. You want your legs to be loose through here so that you can stay with the saddle, because if you're squeezing with this right here, you know, it's really easy to pop up out of the saddle at that point. So pull their head up, sit back, loose through your legs. That's how to ride the buck. So how do you actually make your horse stop bucking? Well, there's a few different things you can do. Number one, and probably the most important thing to know, is the one rein stop. If you weren't taught this as soon as you sat on the horse, this is a vital piece of information. The one rein stop is basically the emergency brake for your horse. How you do the one rein stop is, number one, you're gonna reach down your rein and bring your hand back to your hip, so that you're gonna bring the horse's head around. And see how my hand is on my hip? That's how you wanna be. There's another part to this. So as your horse's head is coming around, this is gonna make them walk in a small circle. The thing is, you want them to go in that circle, because if you look at his back legs, you'll see that his back legs are crossing one over the other. And so with that, if the horse's back legs are moving, the only thing they can do is go in this circle. So I'm also applying a little bit of pressure with this leg, with the leg that I'm turning the horse's head to, and that's going to keep him on that circle. Compared to if I'm riding, and if I only use my reins and not my leg, he'll probably just come to a stop like that. And so the thing is, the horse can actually still move forward with their head turned like that, and that's why you add the leg, because it's going to just put them on that tight circle. So when you have your leg, they can only move in a circle. If you find your horse bucking, you can try and do a one rein stop to get them to stop bucking and to stop their momentum of going forward. Now let's talk about rearing. I personally hate rearing. I mean, I hate bucking and bolting too, but rearing to me is the worst. I do not like it. I've had horses flip over on me, and so that's why it's important to know how to handle your horse when they rear. What I would tell people is, if your horse starts rearing, try and get off of them. You can solve this problem from the ground usually, which is nice. If your horse is rearing, you can't just get off of them and quit. That's not what I'm saying, because then your horse is going to learn that they can rear and that you can get off and they can get out of work. If your horse rears, what I mean is you need to get off and work them on the ground so that they understand rearing is wrong. Every time I've done this, it has worked, and so that's why I'm recommending it, and that's why I say it's okay for you to get off. What I do is, if a horse starts threatening to rear or they rear, I get off and I just lunge them hard so that they know that is wrong, you don't do that. Lunging is a great way to correct bad behavior with horses, and so if you're new to lunging or you haven't tried it before, I have an online course that walks you step by step through how to lunge your horse, and it also troubleshoots some problems you may face when lunging. And so I'll put the link to that course in the description. It's the Leveled Up Lunging course. It's also at shop.equinehelper.com, so you can check that out. Now, that being said, you can't always just get off your horse when they want to rear. So how do you solve it from the saddle? So I'm going to talk about that right now. So one thing you have to remember with a horse that's rearing, it usually comes from them feeling stuck. So rearing usually comes from the horse just having all of this energy built up and they have no way to let it out, so the only thing they can do is just go straight up and rear. Some things you want to look for when your horse may be acting like they're going to rear or threatening to rear, or some behavior that can lead to that, is number one, throwing their head or not wanting to go forward. And so a lot of that indicates that they have pent up energy. I'm not talking about like throwing their head like they got a fly on them, or maybe they're just a little bit annoyed. I'm talking about like throwing their head back and up. With bucking, the horse puts their head down. With rearing, the horse is going to put their head up. So that's something to keep in mind. Since rearing is usually caused by pent up energy, you need to know how to de-escalate that energy and take away that power. The great news is the way you can do that is through the one rein stop. So the same thing, reach your hand down, bring it back to your hip, use this leg that the horse is turning to and nudge them so that they go on a sharp circle. And you see when the horse crosses those back legs one over the other, that's called disengaging the hind end. And what that actually means is you are disengaging the horse's power. Rearing and bucking and bolting all comes from the hind end. And so when you can disengage that power, you have control of what the horse can do. And so if you feel like your horse is going to rear, that's another thing you can try. While this really isn't the long-term solution, this is more of a quick fix. One thing you can do is, if your horse is getting really worked up and they're acting like they may rear, let them move forward and go out. A lot of times that energy is getting pent up if you're asking your horse to stand still or something. And so by just letting them move out and move forward can help de-escalate that. Even if you're just walking in a smaller circle, you don't have to let your horse go off and gallop, but just let them move forward so that they don't get worked up. If you are on a horse when they rear, let's walk through some things you can do to just help yourself stay on the horse or stay safer. One thing you should be aware of is your reins and whether or not you're pulling on them. So if your horse rears and they go up and you're just sitting back like this and you have a hold of the reins, you could actually pull your horse over onto yourself. So one thing you want to do is, number one, you can bend at your waist and kind of go with your horse as if they're jumping, like almost into your 2-point, just so you're kind of taking that weight of pulling back on them and going back. So you can lean forward, you can grab their mane, you can grab their neck like this, and that way you're just more so going with the horse rather than going against them and risking them flipping over. Now let's talk about bolting. So bolting is when you're just going along and your horse just decides to take off as fast as they can. Either they're spooking at something and they're trying to get away, or maybe they bolt and they head back to the barn, or they head back to their horse friends. The important thing with bolting is you have to be able to think through the process when it's happening. So usually with a bolting horse, it takes a little longer than maybe a horse just rearing or bucking, and so you have a little bit more time to process what's going on and think through how to do things. So it's just important to keep yourself composed and not let yourself be freaked out by the situation to where you just don't do anything. You have to act and do something to get your horse to stop. Out of all of these three situations, I would take a bolting horse over a bucking and rearing horse any day. What you can do with bolting is, number one, you have to remember that your horse is in flight mode. They're just going and they have a target or a destination, or they're trying to escape something. So all they care about is going straight. What you want to try and do is break their train of thought in that. Usually if a horse is bolting, they're going too fast to just pull into a one-rein stop. So what I like to try and do is I start trying to get them to weave back and forth, and that's going to help me get them back under control. So if Tucker has bolted and he's just going straight, I'm going to start trying to weave him. So if I can start just trying to steer him from side to side, even if it's a more gradual thing, I find that that usually snaps them out of that destination mentality, so to speak. And usually how it goes is, once I can get them going back and forth like that, then I can go ahead and pull them onto a bigger circle and kind of just wind down from there. So then we'll go on a bigger circle to where even if they're still going fast, they can make the circle, and then eventually I can pull them into that one-rein stop. Sometimes if I'm prepared and like I'm ready and the horse spooks and goes to bolt, like I can think fast enough to pull them into the one-rein stop before they really like take off. So if you can do that, that's great, and you can just keep them in that one-rein stop. The thing is, if they're bolting, they're probably going to just be spinning really fast in that small little circle, but that's okay. If your horse has gotten to where they're just taking off, yeah, you can start to try and zigzag them and then go on a bigger circle and pull them down into the one-rein stop. The biggest thing is to break their train of thought. Another thing to remember is there's usually two reasons a horse bolts. And number one is they're scared of something, and number two is they actually have a destination. Like they're trying to get back to the barn, or they're trying to get back to their friends, or something like that. Tucker here, he usually only bolts because he's scared of something. And so in those situations, I'll do what I talked about with getting him on the smaller circle and things like that. If a horse is bolting because they're going somewhere, you have to correct that behavior of them wanting to go back to wherever they're going. So one thing that I have learned is if your horse is bolting, like to the barn, just let him go to the barn. And when you get to the barn, work him, keep him going. So if Tucker takes off and he's cantering to the barn, when he gets back to the barn, I'm just gonna keep him going and canter him and canter him and canter him. The reason for this is horses are lazy. They don't like to do more work than they have to. So if they learn that taking off and going somewhere is actually gonna earn them more work when they reach that place, they're not gonna do it anymore. And so I've actually found that to be very effective with correcting like barn sour horses or buddy sour horses. Like if the horse bolts back to their field, just get there and just keep going. Just keep cantering and work them. There's two different approaches you can take, but it's important to keep those things in mind so you know how to solve the problem. The good news is with all of these problems, you can use groundwork to help your horse get over them and also help to troubleshoot some things and problem solve. If you're new to groundwork, like I mentioned, we have online courses that are geared to helping you learn groundwork and learn how to lunge your horse. And so once again, that link is in the description. And if you enjoyed this video, please be sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more weekly horse videos.